over the past 2 or so years, pretty much ever since Altergeist Multifaker was released in Flames of Destruction back in 2018, I have played Altergeist, or some variant of Altergeist, at almost every single premier event, regional, YCS, and WCQ, that I've attended in that time period. The only time that I really departed from that was at YCS Knoxville in 2019, as well as the WCQ from that year as well, where both times I played Salamangreats when they were at full power. And honestly, I probably would have continued playing Salamangreats, but on the ban list after the NAWCQ, both Gazelle and Circle went to 1 copy per deck, and I didn't really believe in the strategy as much as I did before those hits. So I went back to Altergeist with a newly limited Multifaker after playing Salamangreats, and I had one of the most successful runs in my Yu-Gi-Oh career, making top 4 of the UDS, and then the very next weekend making top 32 at YCS Portland, and then just a little while later getting second at a regional qualifier. Now those qualifications aren't better than like the actual pro players out there, but they were a pretty big deal for me, and it all happened with Altergeist. What you might not realize though is that after YCS Las Vegas, I actually pretty much quit Altergeist cold turkey. You might not realize this because all the events after that got canceled, but there was going to be 1 regional qualifier and at least 1, possibly 2 YCSs, all of which I was not planning on playing Altergeist at. I basically immediately switched to Invoke Shaddoll's. I really like that strategy. I even signed up for some coaching on the Duelist Academy Patreon so I could learn more about how to play the deck correctly, and I was really excited for it. And then all the events got canceled, which is a real shame. I at least got 1 locals first place in with the deck in real life, which is so far the only event that I've played in real life with Invoke Shaddoll's. But even after all of the in-person events were canceled, I continued playing Shaddoll's and didn't really test Altergeist at all. I played Shaddoll's for every single round of the Crush Card Cup. I played Shaddoll's in many of the online locals that you guys had seen me live stream. But a few days ago, I played in yet another online local tournament, and I decided not to play Shaddoll's. I just went back to old reliable Altergeist, and I had a lot of fun. So I went 4-1 in this 5-round tournament, not anything super crazy long or anything along those lines, but I was pretty proud of how the deck performed. I did play against 3 different versions of Eldritch type strategies, and I only lost to 1 of them, and that was just because the only monsters that I had were 2 Silk, which happens, you know, that's just the Altergeist lifestyle. One of the many quirks of the deck is that you'll draw 2 Silk at the worst possible time. But I had a lot of fun, and I still wanted to show off my deck in today's video. Now I do want to note here that since this tournament happened, I know that Simo posted the top 16 Altergeist list from the Crush Card Cup, and he was playing some really crazy tech, but for this tournament I was not really aware of stuff like Rainbow Neos and Neos Fusion, so it's a little bit less crazy than that. But still, I had a lot of fun and performed decently well, so I still wanted to show off my deck list for today's video. I also want to say before we get into the deck profile that Eternity Code was legal for this online tournament. This isn't like an official locals or anything along those lines, so I know that even though Eternity Code isn't released in North America, it still was legal for this event, so just kind of keep that in mind. We were playing 3 copies of a good old Marionetter, the best card in the deck, 3 copies of Moleseek, the other best card in the deck. All the cards are good, but these are obviously like the main ones that you want to open. Both very good in different situations. A lot of times you want to use them together as well. And then we have 2 copies of Silk, the classic duo that always ends up in your hand at the worst possible moment. 1 copy of Multifaker, good old Multifaker, and 1 copy of Conquery. Okay, I know you guys see this Sangan and you're like, Dzeeff, don't you always say that you hate Sangan? Yes, I do. I mean, it's the team mascot, the deck mascot or whatever, but this card's terrible. For this event, you know, I kind of built this deck last minute. I had like a build ready at the start of the Crush Card Cup several weeks ago. I didn't really mess with it though. I didn't end up playing it at all, so this was kind of an old list, and I couldn't really think of like the 39th or 40th card for this deck, so you're going to see like a couple weird cards, mainly the Sangan and 1 other choice. I think that the Neos Fusion stuff is really cool, and I want to try it out, but also I think that if I would have had a little bit more time to think about it, I probably would have just played like 2 Compulse. I think Compulse is really good right now. But yeah, I did play the 1 copy of Sangan, never summoned it, never drew it. I revealed it off Duality at least 1 time, but yeah, it's just in there to side out and be a team mascot for the Altergeist strategy. For the hand traps, we have 3 copies of Ash Blossom and 3 copies of DD Crow. I saw that the guy that was in the Crush Card Cup doing well, he was playing Gamma. That's also a very good card, really good when you can Gamma off of your opponent ashing your Extravagance. But these cards are really, really solid, and with the Infinite impermanences. You have 9 main decked hand traps. I don't think this deck is that bad going second. I know that sounds weird, but I always have felt that Altergeist has a pretty good combo deck matchup. Eldritch is like the hard one, but DD Crow helps with that a lot. DD Crow in particular is just like one of the strongest hand traps right now, if not the strongest hand trap. It's just so good against Adamancipator and Eldritch. The Eldritch thing, it's not impossible to outgrind them. You have a lot of advantage as well, but it can be pretty tough. But if you draw into those DD Crows, it's way easier. And then for the spell cards, we have 3 copies of Extravagance, Literal Pot of Greed in this deck. Never ever banished all 3 Hexia. There was, I think, I only resolved 2 of these in one match, but even in that match, I still had 1 Hexia left, so got lucky there. But obviously one of the main reasons, if not the main reason, to play Altergeist right now at least. It's such a good card. And then we have 2 copies of Duality. So I guess you can even say I didn't have the 38th card ready either. So like there were like 3 card slots that I wasn't like super confident about. One of them was the extra copy Duality. It was like, okay, you sided out a lot going second, unless you're siding into evenly matched. If you're siding into evenly matched, you want to keep these in, because this hitting evenly matched is just like really, really broken. It just gives you extra opportunities to see that card and break your opponent's board. And then 1 copy of 1-for-1. This card's really good. It's particularly good in this version because we've added so many hand traps. So the DD Crows, and then I guess you can discard the Sangan, are all like extra discards that normally I'm not playing. Normally I don't have that many monster cards, but even when you have a lower monster card count, this card's really solid. I noticed that the guy I was playing Neos Fusion did not play this card, and I think it's probably just because it was too cloggy to play this. But I think this card is really good in this version. It is just like one of the only extenders that you can have that's not a normal summon that you can actually do on the first turn. This deck has extenders when it gets going. You know, you have the Faker special summon, you have the Manifestation special summon, but on like the very first turn, 1-for-1 is just super clutch for a lot of situations. For the trap cards, we had 3 copies of Personal Spoofing, 2 copies of Protocol, and for the first time in a long time, 2 copies of Manifestation. So this was the 39th card. Sangan was the 40th card. Duality was the 38th card. The second copy of this was the 39th card though, and it was like, it was fine. I don't know if I ever actually like used this in a combo. You can like really pop off if you have 2 of these, but yeah, I didn't really notice it. I felt that this is a good like extra card because the format right now is pretty grindy, except against Adamancipator, but against Eldritch you need like all of your resources, and this card is just really, really important. And especially because there's like so many DD Crows around right now, people can sometimes hit the Manifestation in your graveyard if you only have it as a 1-of when you try to add it back with Silk, and that can really mess you up. So by having 2 copies, it's really good. It also lets you like aggressively banish the Manifestation, which I almost never do unless I play 2 copies. But realistically, just like in the case of Duality and Sangan, I sided out the second copy of this card in almost every single game 2 and 3 just for like better options. It's sort of just like a filler card for game 1. We also played 3 copies of Infinite Impermanence. This hand trap isn't like the best hand trap right now, but it is good enough in a lot of situations, and at the very least it makes your opponent end on a suboptimal board. And this deck actually has a pretty good chance of breaking mediocre boards. Like if they only did half of their combo, you have cards like Moleseek, you have a lot of the trap cards that can sort of push through. So if your opponent ends on like a halfway decent board, a lot of the times you can actually get through it. So by having the 9 hand traps, we hopefully can slow our opponent down enough to where they're not ending on like their main combo. We also had, of course, the 6 copies of Solemns. So we have 3 copies of Judgment, which is like the best trap in the game, and then 3 copies of Solemn Strike. These cards are very, very good. I did consider playing 3 copies of Warning for those extra spots, but I don't like Warning. I don't know. It's too many life points for too low of an impact. And then we have lastly 1 copy of Order. I did draw it once. It was pretty clutch. This card is just really good against almost any deck. Even like the mirror match, it's fine because you can keep it in if you're going first and hit their Extravagance or Duality or whatever. I guess Neos Fusion if we're playing that as well. So 40 cards in the main deck there. So for the extra deck, we have some pretty standard stuff, but I do have some new cards and maybe a new card that I forgot about. But so we played 3 copies of Hexia, 3 copies of Link Kribo, 2 copies of Prime Banshee, 2 copies of Almirage because we're playing Sangan, 1 Link Cross. I don't have this card yet because Eternity Code has not been released in North America, but I was playing it at this event. And then 1 copy of Cyframe Lambda, 1 copy of Phoenix, 1 copy of Borreload, and 1 copy of Avramax. So one card that didn't make it into the extra deck because I completely forgot about it was Relinquished Anima. I would probably cut 1 Almirage and 1 Link Kribo to play 2 copies of Relinquished Anima. It's a really good going second option, especially if your opponent doesn't know it exists. I mean, I forgot it exists and I play this deck, so I think that's a very good going second piece of removal. Potentially your 1 normal summon Moleseek could take care of 2 cards on your opponent's side of the field and search a multi-faker in main phase 2, so that's really, really appealing. For the side deck here, I didn't do anything too crazy, but we have 3 copies of Nibiru. Once again, we just want to throw as many hand traps as possible at our opponents. Oftentimes, 1 Nibiru is not enough against the combo decks, but if you have 12 hand traps, you probably will draw 2 different ones in your opening hand. So if you like Nibiru them and then Ash something, or if you Ash something then Nibiru, or you have DD Crow and Ash, or DD Crow and Impermanence, you can usually slow down your opponent quite a bit. 3 copies of A Point of the Red Lotus. This card has been catching on a lot more since I originally played it several months ago, and I love to see that. This card is fantastic. I was not the original pioneer of this card, but it is very, very powerful and is one of the best going first cards in the game right now, at least for decks like this. There was even one game where I drew 2 of these going first, and it was just so unfair. This card's really, really powerful. And then 3 copies of Evenly Matched. Want to break those boards going second. I don't think this card is that strong in the main deck right now. I know the last time I played this deck, I was main decking Evenly Matched. Right now, though, I'm not like super confident about that. I think it's fine in the side deck. 3 copies Heavy Stormduster. Good against a lot of decks. You want to be careful against the Eldritch deck because you don't want to pop like all of their back row and then they can just get advantage in the end phase. So you got to be really strategic about it. Maybe you really need to stop a Conquistador from resolving. So waiting for your opponent to actually use the trap monsters and then Dust Ring so they can't just banish them in the end phase is a really, really good plan. It's also just good against like any random rogue deck. And I know that it seems like the entire format right now is just Eldritch decks and Adamantipator decks, but there are still a lot of people, especially at a local level, that are just playing random rogue strategies. So having this against any back row deck is really, really good. And then lastly, 3 copies of Summon Limit. I don't think I actually ever drew this card, but it is good in theory against Adamantipator. They have very few outs to it other than just the regular back row outs, which usually you can stop with like Solemn Judgment or Point of the Red Lotus. But still, against any combo deck, not just Adamantipator, any combo deck, Summon Limit is really, really solid. So it's a really good going first card. Like I said, never drew it, but I know in theory it is very good, and in practice in the past it's been very good against decks that are similar to Adamantipator. Anyway though, that is going to be my deck profile for Altergeist. Sorry that I haven't been doing that many deck profiles these days. You know, I usually only do deck profiles for premier events that I attend, and there are no premier events right now, but I thought doing some deck profiles when I actually do perform better than average at these locals, when I do actually manage to go X1, would still be pretty fun. And I know I haven't talked about Altergeist in a while, so hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Anyway, I'll see you guys later. Thank you so much for watching. Goodbye.